Swiatek slams Sabalenka's Battle of the Sexes match. Women's tennis stands on its own right now. World number 2 Iga Swiatek said women's tennis was strong enough to thrive without controversial gender-based singles matches like the recent Battle of the Sexes between Nick Kyrgios and Aryna Sabalenka. Former Wimbledon finalist Kyrgios defeated women's world number 1 Sabalenka 6-3, 6-3 in the Dubai exhibition on Sunday despite several rule tweaks implemented by the organizers to level the playing field. Swiatek. Women's tennis stands on its own right now. Critics had warned that the match, a nod to the 1973 original Battle of the Sexes, in which women's trailblazer Billie Jean King downed the then 55-year-old former Grand Slam winner Bobby Riggs, risked trivializing the women's game. Six-time Grand Slam champion Iga Swiatek said she chose not to watch the Dubai contest, which King said lacked the stakes of her historic clash and critics dismissed as a publicity stunt and cash grab. The idea of a battle of the sexes has always carried a certain theatrical weight. It promises spectacle, controversy, and a throwback to an era when women's sport was forced to justify its existence by competing, symbolically or literally, against men. So when the phrase resurfaced in modern tennis discourse, it landed not as nostalgia, but as friction. And into that friction stepped Iga Swiatek, not with a shout, but with something far more powerful: clarity. Women's tennis stands on its own right now. The statement didn't need exclamation marks. It didn't need anger. It landed because it was true. Echoes of an old arena. The term Battle of the Sexes immediately evokes Billie Jean King in 1973, walking onto the court not just with a racket, but with the weight of representation. Back then, the battle was real. Prize money was unequal. Media respect was conditional. Visibility was fragile. King didn't just win a match, she cracked open a door. But doors, once opened, are not meant to be guarded forever. They are meant to be walked through. Swiatek's response to the modern suggestion of reviving such a spectacle was not dismissive of history, but protective of the present. The implication behind a battle of the sexes today is that women's tennis still needs comparison, validation, or novelty to remain relevant. Swiatek challenged that assumption head-on. Not by arguing statistics, not by listing trophies, but by reframing the question itself. Why battle when women's tennis is already thriving? The present is loud enough. Look at the current landscape of women's tennis and it hums with intensity. Stadiums fill. Matches stretch past midnight. Rivalries ignite across surfaces and seasons. The sport is no longer leaning on legacy, it is creating it in real time. Swiatek herself embodies this era: relentless baseline precision, emotional discipline, and an almost scientific approach to improvement. Across the net stands Aryna Sabalenka, all power and fire, a player whose game crackles with risk and reward. When they meet, the contrast is cinematic, but the quality is indisputable. These are not athletes asking to be noticed. They are athletes demanding to be watched. In this context, proposing a battle of the sexes feels less like innovation and more like misplacement, an old frame trying to contain a new picture. Power without comparison. What Swiatek articulated, perhaps without intending to spark headlines, was a deeper cultural shift. Women's sport no longer needs to define itself in opposition to men's sport. For decades, comparisons were weaponized. Serve speeds, endurance, physicality, metrics chosen selectively to reinforce an outdated hierarchy. But comparison is a shallow lens. It ignores skill, strategy, psychology, and artistry, the very elements that make sport compelling. Women's tennis today thrives because of its own internal rivalries, its own unpredictability, its own emotional transparency. Matches swing wildly. Momentum shifts brutally. No lead is safe. The drama is self-contained. To suggest that its excitement must be enhanced by a gendered exhibition is to misunderstand where the sport already stands. It stands tall. Sabalenka, spectacle, and the spark of debate. Aryna Sabalenka's openness to the idea of a battle of the sexes wasn't born from disrespect. If anything, it reflected her personality, bold, playful, unafraid of spectacle. Tennis needs characters like Sabalenka. It needs fire as much as it needs focus. But Swiatek's response showed the counterbalance such a sport requires: restraint, perspective, and an understanding of symbolism. This wasn't Swiatek versus Sabalenka. It was philosophy versus framing. One saw opportunity in the event. The other saw risk in the implication. And in that tension, a valuable conversation emerged, not about who would win such a match, but about whether the match should exist at all. A generation that doesn't ask permission. What makes Swiatek's words resonate is that they sound like they belong to a generation that doesn't feel indebted to past justifications. Respectful of history, yes, but not confined by it. This generation grew up watching Serena Williams dominate without explanation. They saw packed stadiums, equal prize money at Grand Slams, and global fan bases. They didn't inherit insecurity, they inherited expectation. Expectation of excellence. Expectation of respect. Expectation of autonomy. When Swiatek says women's tennis stands on its own, she isn't making a demand. She's stating a condition that already exists. Beyond tennis, into culture. The debate stretches beyond the baseline. It reflects how society still occasionally frames women's achievement as remarkable only in comparison to men's standards. But modern audiences are changing. They don't need translation. They don't need contrast. They tune in because the match matters. Because the rivalry is real. Because the outcome is uncertain. Women's tennis, at its best, offers all of this, without footnotes. Not a rejection, but a redefinition. Swiatek's stance is not about shutting doors or silencing creativity. Exhibition matches, cross-gender events, and playful formats can have their place. But labels matter. Language carries history. Battle of the Sexes belongs to a time when women were still fighting to be seen as equals. Today, they are not fighting for a seat at the table. They are setting the menu. Standing, not battling. In the end, the most powerful part of Swiatek's comment is its calm. No outrage. No defensiveness. Just assurance. Women's tennis does not need a battle to prove its worth. It does not need comparison to validate its beauty. It does not need to look backward to move forward. Stands, right now, on its own. And if the sound of that statement feels quieter than a spectacle, listen again. That's not silence. That's confidence.